Hi, my name is Leah Robert, and I'm a sales engineer with Solace. Today we're going to be talking about how you can embrace event-driven architecture with the PubSub platform. What we're noticing is a wide adoption of event-driven architecture across various industries. It's becoming a central part of the architecture to be able to dynamically move data from your publishers to your consumers, no matter where they might be hosted. But what we're noticing as well with the maturity of event-driven architecture at these locations or at these organizations is new challenges. You have more integrations that need to occur, different applications, protocols, and APIs that need to talk to each other. There's also a lack of visibility to track and trace information. How do I know that my event got there? How do we troubleshoot an issue where one team is saying, hey, I didn't get this message. Hey, and another team is saying that they did publish it. Understanding all of that is becoming quite the challenge with the black box and the decoupled nature of an event-driven architecture. Decoupled events also can bring up different security considerations. How do I ensure that those who have access to certain data should have access to that data? Really, there's a lack of event governance and also, event reuse. How do I promote my different data through a catalog for other developing teams to be able to access and understand how to receive the data that they're interested in? And that's where an event-driven platform can come into play. It can provide you with the tooling you need to be able to solve all of these questions, these challenges. The key functions are around how do you stream events? How do you move the data across different environments and regions? How do you manage those events and understand what does the payload schema look like? What does my topic look like in terms of what you're publishing to and how you expose that to your internal or even external consumers of that data? Of course, how do you monitor your different events, your different applications, and of course, how you're moving all of this information with the event broker itself and understand what's going on there. There's also considerations around efficiency of developing new applications. How do you understand to get that information from a broker? How do you develop the application in such a way that you're getting the information you need and you understand what that information looks like? Consistency around best practices. There needs to be very good guidelines on how to interact with the broker such that you're not impacting anyone else who might be connected and you're able to consume the events fast enough. There's also the aspect of scalability. As you have new innovations, new applications being created, how do you scale the broker and the ecosystem, whether that's horizontally or vertically, to accommodate all of that new growth? And that's why Solace built the PubSub platform to really solve all of these challenges and provide these benefits of efficiency, consistency, and scalability. So the PubSub platform is built off of really three main components. The first is the event streaming layer, and this is the piece of software that is actually going to be moving the data. So these are event brokers that are able to dynamically receive information from publishers and be able to push that to the consumers who are interested in that information. You can link these brokers together to horizontally scale, and really what that's called is an event mesh, allowing you to move data across a local environment. It could be across different cloud providers, and it could be even across different edge sites, whether that be a retail store or even an edge factory. Now, understanding how we monitor all of these brokers, that's where our event insights comes into play. You can optimize your performance by understanding what your message rates are, and if there is maybe a queue that is starting to pile up a little bit because a consumer is not fast enough. We can also understand the general health of all of the brokers in the ecosystem and gain insights from that. The third component is the event management layer, and this is allowing you to design, document, and discover your event-driven interactions. It's a place for architects to go to outline what your applications and events will look like. And it's a place for developers to go to search for the event they're particularly interested in, that they need to consume, that they need to publish. And so these 3 layers, components, allow you to design, deploy, monitor, and manage your event-driven architecture, and not worry as much about these different challenges that could come up as you scale your deployment. Now, what does this look like? All of these different components are available in a single pane of glass. One cloud-native console for your event management layer, the PubSub Plus Event Portal, the event streaming layer, PubSub Plus Event Brokers, and your event insights, PubSub Plus Insights. So what we're going to do now is jump into the UI itself and take a tour of the PubSub Plus platform. So here we are with our PubSub Plus Cloud Console. We've got the event management layer, the event streaming layer, and the event insights for monitoring layer. We're going to start off with the cluster manager. And so when I click on the cluster manager, we can see the existing services that are created. I've got one in GCP and in Azure at the moment. We're going to walk through the steps of creating a new broker service. So what we can do here is give this broker service a name. We can also choose the service type. So we've got a developer service, which is 100 connections, standalone broker with 10 gigabytes message storage. Really great for getting started and just having something to connect to. We also have the option for your test environments and, of course, your production environment for an enterprise broker service, which is a highly available group. This enterprise service comes in a couple of what I like to call t-shirt sizes, 250 connections, all the way up to 100,000 connections. Lots of different options in between as well. And so when I choose the number of connections, this is really talking about concurrent TCP connections that can be established on this broker service. When that's chosen, there is a default message storage tied to that. What we can independently change that dependent on our requirements. So I could say 50 gigabytes instead of 25 here, and that can go all the way up to 800 gigabytes, and actually even beyond there if that is part of your requirements. When you choose the enterprise service type, it is highly available by default, but you can choose to be standalone if you'd like. So that's going to give you more TCP connections than the developer service, but the option to have that standalone broker as well. I'm going to choose a developer service for this AWS instance, and then we have to choose our cloud. So there's a couple of different options on how or where we can deploy this broker service. The first and foremost is in Solace Public Cloud, and this is in AWS, Azure, or GCP. You have single tenancy broker in a multi-tenancy VPC or VNet. The next option is Solace Dedicated, and so that is single tenancy broker in a single tenancy VPC or VNet in AWS, Azure, or GCP. The third option is deploying the broker service in your own environment, whether that's cloud environment or on-premise. All we require is Kubernetes. And so when you want to choose a Solace Dedicated or private cloud region, you would have one or maybe more than one private cloud options here. And of course, we can customize that name so it makes the most sense to you. Going up to the AWS here, we're going to click on the map, and you can see we've got quite a few options for the region. I'm going to choose Canada Central here, click OK, and that's really all that is required to choose your event broker service. We can click Create Service at this time. There's a couple of optional advanced connection options that you can set here. For example, there is port configurations. So in general, we're secure by default with the Cloud Console. However, we do support the use of unsecure ports if that is a requirement of yours. So you can go in and you have to manually enable the use of plain text ports for the various protocols that we do support. Once you've chosen your advanced connection options, again, you can click Create Service. You can change your port configurations once the broker service is created as well. You can do that through the Manage tab for that broker service, which we'll get into in just a second. So while this AWS broker service is being stood up in the background, I'm going to click on one of the existing services and give you a little bit of a tour of what that looks like. So when we first click on the broker, we can see high-level details about what's going on. So how many active connections we have, the number of queues on this broker service, and the amount of message storage that we've used. We can also see the Solace broker version. So if you're looking for a specific feature and you're waiting for that version to be available, you can go into your event broker service and see if that lines up with the release notes. In terms of connecting your application to this broker service, we can go to the Connect tab, and this is where you can see the list of protocols that are supported by Solace with the ports that have been enabled on your service. So we've got our own Solace messaging format, either just over TCP or via WebSockets, web messaging. We also support AMQP 1.0, MQTT 3.1.1 and 5.0, and HTTP or RESTful interactions natively out of box. And so if you're choosing one of these protocols to connect to the broker, you can simply open that drop down there and you have your connection details on the right-hand side. The username and password that are identified here are really the default when you create the service. You can enable different authentication schemes such as LDAP or Active Directory integration, OAuth, Kerberos, or client certificate authentication if that's something you desire. After the Connect tab, this is where we can go to that Manage window. So let's say I wanted to change the port configurations on this particular broker service. I can go to the Manage tab, go to Advanced Options, and there's quite a few things we can enable or change here. Syslog forwarding for monitoring in our own syslog server. We can also, scrolling down here, see that there's a port configuration section for enabling or disabling specific ports. If I go back to the main Manage tab, we can see there are a couple of kind of quick settings here. So I can click on any one of these and be opened right up into the PubSub Plus Broker Manager to make any configurations that I'd like. So let's say we want to change some of the access controls. We can click on that button. It's going to open us directly to the access control section of this broker, and we can see our different objects here that we can go ahead and configure. Okay, back on our Cloud Console page, we also have the ability to quickly connect a publisher or subscribing application through the Try Me tab. So we can simply connect these two, subscribe to the Try Me subscription that's kind of auto-filled there, and of course if we publish events, we will see them being consumed or received by the subscriber on the right-hand side. So this is particularly useful for developers. Maybe they're developing a subscribing application. You can easily publish some kind of trial messages here through this window. So if we go back to our services page here, we can see this progress bar. It's coming along nicely for that developer class broker that we're standing up. And so we'll come back to that in a moment. But while we're waiting for that to come up, we're going to go into the event portal window here. And I've got these opened up in separate tabs here, just to make it easy for us. So when we open the designer window, there's going to be a list of application domains that we'd like to edit or view. An application domain is really however you'd like to define it. It's a grouping of applications and events based off of team, line of business, use case, however you'd like to organize that information. Within that application domain, you have a couple of objects that you would go and create. Applications, of course, so a representation of your different services, your different applications. And so those are listed here with our kind of basic retail example. We've got analytics service, inventory, payment, shipping, and a customer notification system. We've got our events, order created, paid, reserved, etc., representing those different kind of business events that could be occurring. We also have, in this case, we've got a schema to represent our order created event. And so this is helpful for our developers to reference what is this event going to look like, and how do I access the different components of this event when I consume it. So I'm going to back up here and go into our event tab, go to order created, and just take a closer look. So this order created event actually, you'll notice, has multiple versions. And so part of the event portal is to do version or lifecycle management of these different objects. We can see we've got one in deprecated state, one in release state, and the current one that we're looking at, which is in a draft state. If you're not familiar with Solace's topic approach, we use topics for dynamically routing data from publisher to consumers. We approach it as a hierarchical topic, which is a little bit different from some other brokers, in that you can really describe the event. And this is metadata that's attached to the message itself, as opposed to an object on the broker. The topic address allows you to attach these different variables as levels, and then you can subscribe to specific levels of that data. So let's say we're interested in a more broad subscription. We can use wildcards in our topic subscription. If we want very specific data, we can call out those specific variables. So here we've got a country level, and if we hover over that, we can see there's actually a couple options for it. United States, Canada, Mexico. Of course, the list could go on if we wanted to represent those in this enumerated variable. We can also represent an unbounded variable. And so that's this order ID at the end, which would be pretty unique across your different events. You'd have the same order ID and then maybe a different state for that order ID, new, shipped, updated, etc. But ultimately, your order IDs are going to be very unique across the different events published on the broker. So that's why that's an unbounded as opposed to enumerated. Again, I mentioned that schema before. That is referenced by the event object. And so again, we can see this JSON schema. And as a developer, I can really know exactly where to go to pull out this, miscellaneous delivery number or whatever information you need for your application to process properly. Now, if I go back to my application list here, we can go into, let's say, the payment service. And again, we have that lifecycle management with versioning on the left side there. Our events, we've got 2 events that we're subscribed to or receiving, and 1 that we're publishing. And so for subscribing, as defined by this kind of toggle button here, we are subscribed to order created event and order updated. Publishing, we are sending out an order paid event from the payment service. So this is giving you a good idea of, in a table format, what is your application consuming? What are they subscribing? And we can open this up and see what that topic potentially looks like to understand how, if I make a change to that event, how that's going to impact this particular broker or this particular service. After we have created some of these objects within the designer, that is actually going to automatically populate our catalog. And so within our catalog, I can search for a specific keyword as a developer that I'm interested in, let's say, consuming. And we can see order paid comes up when I search for paid keyword. We can click on that object and see there's 2 versions that match that. And I can click on one of these versions and see kind of a snapshot of what that object looks like. So as a developer, I know this is the format of the topic, so I know how to subscribe to this information. And we can also see some other details, maybe what applications are referencing this particular object. The third component of the event portal is this runtime manager, and I'm just going to open it up here in this tab. And this runtime manager is representation graphically of these application interactions. We've got these bigger circles representing our applications, the smaller circles representing the events. And we can see who's publishing what event. Shipping service is publishing the order shipped event by this arrow on it. Order shipped is being consumed by inventory service, analytics, and customer notification. Okay. So again, we've got quick links for all these different objects. We can click on this and we can open up the information or even open it in Designer if we have some changes we want to make. Also in here, you'll notice there's some dotted lines, there's some solid lines, and largely that's representative of the object state. So if it's dotted line for this application down here, that's really representing it's in a draft state as opposed to a released or potentially deprecated state. Now, within this runtime manager component as well, there's the ability to run a scan against your broker service, against your event mesh, and audit your runtime against what you've designed in the portal. So it's going to do discrepancy flagging for maybe a queue that has a subscription on your runtime that's not represented in portal. And so it's going to identify those differences and flag them for you so you can take corrective action on that. Now, going back to our dashboard here, Cluster Manager, we can see we've got that third service in AWS created. It's running. You'll notice one difference about that service from the other two that were existing already, this triangle icon. And what that's indicating is if it's a part of an event mesh or not. So here, if we hover over, you can see the mesh name, Leah Mesh, for this GCP and Azure broker service. AWS, of course, because we just created this broker service, is not included in that mesh. So how do we create this event mesh to be able to move data across these different broker services, these different cloud environments, and make sure that's all configured properly? We can go to the Mesh Manager on the left side here. Clicking on Mesh Manager, we're going to find that Leah Mesh. And right now you can see just those two brokers are included in this mesh. We want to go in and add that AWS broker. Add service. Search for our particular service we want to add in here and click Add Service. And once we hit Save Changes, we should see that we've got the GCP, Azure, and now the AWS broker services all connected together and able to dynamically move data between these locations, between these regions. Of course, with role-based access control included there through the access control object on the broker. Now, what we can do, if we go to our cluster manager here, we're going to open the GCP broker, and I'm going to open the AWS broker, and we're just going to see a really quick interaction of subscribing to data on the AWS broker that we just added into the event mesh on the Try Me subscription. And then on our GCP broker, we're going to go to the Try Me tab here, connect to publisher, publish. Let's do a couple of events there. If we go back to the AWS side, we can see those messages have been consumed. The final piece is Datadog. And so if I go to our dashboards here, just to give you a quick snapshot into what this looks like, these are all the pre-built dashboards that are ready for you to kind of use and look at. We can also go in and create our own dashboard if that's something we want to do to look at some customized data or specific data that we're most interested in. So that's an overview of the PubSub platform. We've got the event management layer for designing, documenting, and discovering your event-driven interactions, your applications, your events, and even representing those schemas. We've got the event streaming layer, which is the brokers that are actually moving that data, as well as the mesh manager, enabling you to connect those brokers together. And then event insights, which allows you to monitor your event brokers with the pre-built dashboards and the ability to customize your own. That's the PubSub platform. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those now. Thank you.